14 years after my former mother-in-law told me my premature son had died, I saw his crescent-shaped birthmark on a teenage volunteer at the Children's Hospital Gala, honoring her for protecting children. The boy was holding out my coat when his cuff slipped back. For 1 second, the ballroom disappeared. I saw a plastic incubator, a knitted blue cap, and the photograph I had carried for 14 years. "Ma'am," he said, "are you all right?" I forced myself to look at his face instead of his wrist. Dark eyes, a guarded expression, a small crease beside his mouth that looked painfully familiar. "What's your name?" "Eli Cole." "How old are you?" 14. "When was your birthday?" He told me. The same day my son had been born 11 weeks early. Across the ballroom, applause rose beneath a 10-foot portrait of Evelyn Bennett. My former mother-in-law stood on stage accepting a lifetime award for protecting vulnerable children. My ex-husband Adrian stood beside her. Ruth Calder had asked me to come that night. The retired NICU nurse had called 3 days earlier and said she had found something connected to my baby's record. She told me to bring the newborn photograph, my half of the hospital bracelet, and the certified search showing no death certificate had ever been filed. She also warned me not to confront anyone before she arrived. But Ruth had not told me I might find a living boy. "Were you born here?" I asked. Eli's smile faded. "I don't know." A woman's voice cut through the music. "Laurel." Evelyn was walking toward us with Adrian, the family lawyer, and 2 security officers. Her smile stayed fixed. Then she noticed Eli's wrist. For 1 second, her expression changed. "Step away from the boy," she said. "I only asked him a question." Evelyn turned to the nearest guests. "Laurel lost a child here many years ago. Grief can make innocent coincidences feel meaningful." The words were soft. The cruelty inside them was not. One officer moved closer. Adrian looked at me as if I were dangerous. "Please," he said, "don't do this to another child." "Another child?" I stared at him. "What did your mother tell you happened after our son died?" His jaw tightened. "She didn't have to tell me. You left." I had received a letter bearing Adrian's signature saying he blamed me for the premature birth, had arranged the burial, and never wanted to see me again. He had been told I left. Evelyn had built 2 graves that night. One for my child, one for my marriage. Eli looked between us. "What is she talking about?" "I'm not asking you to believe me," I said. "I only need you to see why I asked." I opened my purse. Evelyn's smile vanished. I took out the faded, newborn photograph and the plastic stub from my hospital bracelet. In the picture, my baby's wrist rested beside his face. The crescent-shaped mark showed beneath the clear band. I read the last 4 digits on my bracelet. Evelyn's hand tightened around her crystal award. "Why do you recognize that number?" I asked. The award slipped from her fingers and struck the marble floor. The room went silent. "Martin," she snapped. "Take those from her." That was when Ruth stepped out from behind the first row of tables. She carried a clear evidence pouch containing a tiny infant bracelet. "Don't touch her property," Ruth said. She held it beneath the ballroom lights and read the serial number. It matched mine. Eli stepped back. Adrian went pale. Ruth placed a stamped transfer sheet on the table. A birthmark can be a coincidence. Matching mother and infant admission numbers cannot. Evelyn reached for the paper, but the hospital board chair blocked her hand. Ruth looked at me. "There was no physician's pronouncement of death in my incident report," she said. "Your baby was transferred out of this hospital at 2:17 in the morning. He was alive." My knees nearly gave way, but I stayed standing. Ruth covered the signature at the bottom of the form. "Someone in this room signed him out." Elle's voice was barely a whisper. "What son?" Part 2. Eli's question hung over the silent ballroom. I wanted to cross the space between us. Instead, I stayed where I was. "A baby born here 14 years ago," I said. "A baby with your birthday and that mark. I don't know anything more yet." Adrian reached for the transfer sheet, but Ruth pulled it back into the evidence pouch. The board chair witnesses this first, she said. I placed my certified search beside the newborn photograph. There is no death certificate under my son's name. Then I unfolded an old insurance statement. A neonatal transport charge had been paid for hours after Evelyn told me my baby was dead. Adrian stared at the date. That proves nothing, Evelyn said. Laurel has spent years feeding an obsession. Adrian barely seemed to hear her. You signed a letter, he said to me. You said you couldn't face me. You told me not to look for you. I received a letter from you saying I had caused the premature birth. Martin Shaw moved toward the table. Ruth blocked him. Both letters came through your office, didn't they? Asked. His face tightened. Evelyn turned to security. Take Eli upstairs. His flight leaves at 8 tomorrow morning, and he will not miss it because of this circus. That was the first time Eli looked afraid. Flight? I asked. Boarding school, he said. She arranged it after I asked for my original birth certificate. The hospital board chair told security no one was taking Eli anywhere until the records were secured. Ruth opened the transfer report. The infant was moved under a temporary name, Baby Cole. Eli went still. Then he looked at me. Are you saying my parents stole me? No. I kept my voice steady. I'm saying someone may have lied to all of us. The people who raised you loved you. Nothing we learned tonight can erase that. His eyes filled, but he didn't look away. I never left you, I said. But I won't ask you to call me anything until we know the truth. Ruth turned the authorization form toward Adrian. Under receiving guardian was a signature he had known all his life. He looked up at Evelyn, and every trace of color left his face. Part 3. The signature beneath receiving guardian read, Evelyn Bennett. Adrian stared at it, as if the letters might rearrange themselves. My mother signed this. Evelyn lifted her chin. I authorized an emergency transfer. You were in no condition to make decisions. I was the baby's father, and Laurel was hemorrhaging, she said. Someone had to act. Ruth Calder tapped the form through the clear evidence pouch. An emergency transfer is not the problem. The false destination, the temporary name, and the missing parental signatures are. Eli stood beside the co-check table, pale and very still. I wanted to reach for him, but I didn't. He had already spent his life surrounded by adults who made choices for him. The hospital board chair, Lena Harper, stepped between Evelyn and the exit. No one removes a document from this room. Security, close the ballroom doors to outside traffic. Call hospital counsel and child protective services. Evelyn gave a small laugh. You cannot detain my ward. I'm not detaining him, Lena said. I'm asking a 14-year-old whether he wants to leave with you. Every face turned toward Eli. He looked at the transfer form, then at Evelyn. No, he said. It was only one word. It was the first choice anyone had given him. 14 years earlier, I had not been given one. Adrian and I had been married for 6 years when I became pregnant. We were happy in the ordinary ways that never make family photographs. Late-night grocery runs, his hand on my back when I fell asleep on the couch. Evelyn called me sweet when other people were listening. In private, she reminded me that the Bennett family had standards. She chose the obstetrician, offered to manage the nursery, and suggested I stop working in medical billing because a Bennett wife did not need to argue over insurance codes. I kept my job. That was the first thing she never forgave. At 31 weeks, I woke with blood on the sheets. The delivery became a blur of ceiling lights. Adrian's frightened voice, and a nurse telling me my son was breathing but needed a higher-level NICU. Ruth brought him to me for less than a minute. He wore a blue knitted cap, and a clear bracelet circled his wrist. Beneath it was a small crescent-shaped vascular mark. Ruth took one photograph because I begged her. Then the room filled with alarms. I woke hours later weak. She sat beside my bed in a gray suit, holding my wedding ring in her palm. The baby didn't survive the transfer, she said. That was the first lie that stole 14 years from me. Part 4. Elle asked for Adrian. He blames you, Evelyn answered. He saw the baby before they took him away. He cannot bear to look at you. Elle asked to see my son. Evelyn said the receiving hospital had handled the remains because Adrian wanted a private burial. I screamed until a nurse sedated me. The next morning, Martin Shaw brought me a letter bearing Adrian's signature. You ignored the doctor. You kept working. I cannot forgive you for what happened to our son. At the bottom, one sentence ended, my marriage, do not contact me again. I left the hospital with a photograph, half of a matching bracelet, and no body to bury. Adrian had been given a different letter. He showed it to me that night in a private conference room beside the ballroom. The paper was old and folded soft at the edges. Cannot face you after what happened. I need to disappear. Please do not look for me. My name was typed below a signature that resembled mine. I thought you left, he said. You let your mother handle every call, I answered. I was grieving, so was I. He lowered his eyes. That was the difference between being deceived and being innocent. Adrian had been deceived, but he was not innocent. He had accepted the version that required the least courage from him. While hospital counsel secured Ruth's report, Evelyn tried to turn the gala into a misunderstanding. She told donors I was a traumatized former daughter-in-law exploiting an unrelated child. Martin called the transfer form an incomplete copy and said the letters were private marital documents with no relevance to Eli. Then I placed my own evidence on the conference table. For years I had asked for my son's death certificate. I was told premature infants were sometimes registered under temporary names, that old records had been archived, that I needed another form. Last month, the state had finally issued a certified search. No death certificate existed for my son under my name. Adrian's name, or the hospital's temporary infant record. Beside it, I placed an insurance statement. For hours after Evelyn said my baby died, neonatal transport had been billed and paid. The destination code belonged to St. Catherine's Children's Center, 40 miles away. Ruth had found the same code in her incident report. I filed this because the infant left without direct consent from either parent, Ruth said. The next day, the records director told me the child had died and ordered me to withdraw it. Why didn't you come to me? I asked. I tried. Her voice broke. Martin's office told me, you had entered long-term psychiatric care and contact would endanger you. Evelyn folded her hands. This still does not make Eli your child. No, I said. It makes a DNA test necessary. Eli looked at me. Would it erase my parents? Part 5. The question hurt more than anything Evelyn had said. No, I told Eli. The people who raised you are your parents. If the test says we are related, it does not subtract love. He nodded slowly. I want the test. Evelyn stood. You are a minor. I do not consent. Eli pulled a document from inside his volunteer jacket. My school asked for my original birth certificate. You gave me a delayed copy with no birth hospital listed. When I asked why, you booked a flight for tomorrow. He placed the paper beside the transfer form. Both carried the same file number. By midnight, a child welfare attorney had spoken with Eli privately, based on the disputed guardianship, the transfer record, and Eli's stated fear of being taken overseas. An emergency judge suspended international travel. Eli was placed temporarily with a neutral guardian he knew from school. Evelyn's control ended before the gala decorations came down. The DNA results arrived 3 days later. The probability that Adrian and I were Eli's biological parents was greater than. I read the report alone. I did not cheer. I sat on my kitchen floor and cried for the infant I had lost, the boy who had grown without me, and the 14 birthdays no court could return. Then I called Eli. The test confirms it. He was quiet. Are you okay? I asked. I don't know. That's a good enough answer. The investigation moved faster after the DNA result. I had spent years in medical billing. I knew a changed name did not erase every trail. Charges kept, timestamps. Transport companies kept dispatch numbers, and insurance systems kept original patient identifiers beneath corrected claims. The neonatal claim connected my admission number 2, baby Cole. A hospital audit showed the electronic index had been altered 6 years. Later, during a records migration, the administrator's login had been used from a terminal in the Bennett Foundation office. That administrator had received consulting payments from a trust controlled by Evelyn. Martin's files supplied the rest. The 2 letters, one sent to Adrian, one sent to me, had been created from the same office template. They carried the same formatting, error and metadata from Martin's assistant's computer. My supposed relinquishment of parental rights used a signature copied from a routine hospital form. The Coles had not stolen Eli. They had been told his mother was mentally ill. His father had surrendered his rights, and the private placement was lawful. They had loved him, protected him, and saved every paper they were given. After they died, Evelyn stepped forward as the family benefactor, who had known Eli since infancy. She had always known, but the audit uncovered one more reason she had kept him hidden. Part 6. The Bennett Trust reserved part of its voting interest for the family's first grandson. Evelyn had not only wanted me gone, she wanted Adrian dependent on her and Eli raised under her control. Her plan was to reveal him only when he was old enough to inherit. Too loyal to question her. When Eli began asking for his original birth certificate, she arranged the overseas boarding school. At the emergency board hearing, the hospital used the same ballroom because the press equipment was already in place. Evelyn's giant portrait had been removed, leaving a pale rectangle on the wall. She entered in a navy suit with Martin beside her and tried to claim she had rescued an infant from unstable parents. "I made a difficult decision for a child," she said into the microphone. "I stood at the table below the stage." "No, you made a decision for yourself." Lena Harper displayed only the evidence Eli had agreed could be made public: the matching admission numbers, the live transfer, the missing death certificate, and the audit trail linking the altered record to the foundation office. I placed the 2 forged letters side by side. "You told me my husband blamed me," I said. "You told him I abandoned our child. You gave my living son to another family and let me mourn him for 14 years. Evelyn's composure cracked. "You were never suited to this family." There it was, not sacrifice, not protection, ownership. Adrian stepped to the microphone. "My mother lied to me," he said, "but I chose not to verify the lie. I did not ask for a death certificate. I did not find Laurel myself. My silence helped this happen." He looked at me, but he did not ask for forgiveness. For once, he understood that an apology was not a key. The board removed Evelyn as chair and froze her authority over the foundation. The court ended her guardianship of Eli and suspended her control of the trust created for him. Martin was referred to the state bar and prosecutors for fraud and forged adoption documents. The records administrator agreed to cooperate. Evelyn turned toward Eli. "Come with me. These people are using you." Eli took one step backward. "You knew who I was every day of my life," he said, "and you watched me ask." That was the moment she finally lost. Not when the board voted. Not when security escorted Martin away. She lost when the boy she had treated like an inheritance stopped obeying her. Part 7. Nothing after that became easy. Eli kept the name Cole. I told him I was glad. His parents had given him that name, packed his lunches, and taught him to ride a bicycle. Truth did not require him to betray them. Our first visits took place with a family counselor. Sometimes Eli asked questions for an hour. Sometimes we played cards and did not talk about the past at all. Adrian attended only when Eli requested him. He accepted that fatherhood was not restored by a DNA result. It had to be built from whatever Eli was willing to give. I did not reunite with Adrian. We learned to speak honestly about our son. That was enough. 3 months later, Eli came to my house alone for the first time. I showed him the small box I had carried through 4 apartments and 14 years. Inside were his blue hospital cap, the photograph, my half of the bracelet, and 14 sealed envelopes. "What are those?" he asked. "Birthday letters," I said. "You wrote to me when you thought I was dead." I didn't know where else to put the love. He chose the envelope marked 14. He read it at my kitchen table while afternoon light moved across the floor. When he finished, he folded the letter carefully and slipped it into his pocket. At the door, he hesitated. "Can I keep this? It was always yours." A few weeks later, we volunteered together at a new hospital program, helping families recover missing or conflicting medical records. Another volunteer asked Eli who I was. He looked at me first, as if checking that the choice still belonged to him. Then he said, "This is my mom, Laurel." I had imagined that word for 14 years. When it finally came, it was quiet. That made it perfect.